Hello, my, 18 subscribers. And to anybody else who may be randomly stumbling upon this obscure YouTube channel of mine. Hi! I am the Nerd Smurf. I call myself that because, well, I just kind of improvised the nickname in this video here. And the reason why I have this little cartoon version of me is because I originally came out with this video defending Avatar from a lot of the lame take criticisms lobbied at the franchise. Oh, it's just Smurfahuntus in space or whatever. And so this video was meant to be a response to all that, where I talked about things like originality, character depth, and memorability.
The papyrus?
No, we're not talking about the papyrus.
But the papyrus!
Yeah, I know. There's papyrus. It's stupid.
Talk about the papyrus!
Okay, shh, calm down, calm down. We'll get to that later. Now, obviously this channel is not just going to be about Avatar. I mean, as you can see, I've published a few other videos that have nothing to do with it, even though I've reused the same cartoon because... Look, I'm just lazy, okay? The template's already there, it's easy to reuse and repurpose, and I feel kind of weird about showing my face right now, so deal with it. But with the upcoming release of Fire and Ash, obviously this is kind of in the zeitgeist again, but with that I am seeing, once again, more of the same lame critiques being made that I've already addressed, and I'm not going to rehash them again here, but I am going to address these following 2 points. The first one is brief. 1.
Oh, it's just gonna be a repeat of the original all over again. The evil humans are back and they're killing the natives and destroying the planet. Oh, and then we can get some, like, cool CGI and they get to bond with the animals. It's just the same stuff over and over again. And it's like,
what are you expecting? Like, this is what the story is about. If you don't like that story, fine, but, like, why are you acting surprised when you go see a sequel that's just a variation off of the same theme again? Like, that's how sequels work! I mean, just wait until you watch Harry Potter.
Oh no, the kids have to go back to Hogwarts again, and the Dark Lord might be coming back again. They have to defeat the Dark Lord, or one of the Dark Lord's minions again. Oh no, not Star Wars. The Sith are returning or whatever, and we have to fight the Sith and restore balance to the Force again. Oh no, Back to the Future. The DeLorean is broken and Marty McFly is stuck in some point in time. He has to find the professor to fix the time machine, all while defeating the evil, stupid bully over and over again. Like, guys!
But you know what, I'm not going to go into too much more detail about this first point here. What I would like to focus on instead is this second point, which is a variation off of the whole simple equals bad thing. That is, Avatar lacks nuance, and not being nuanced is bad, therefore Avatar is bad. Now, a lot of what you're going to see next is basically something that's been sitting in my drafts for a long time. When I originally set out to make part 2 of the Avatar video essay stuff, I came across this video from a YouTuber called Pilgrim's Past. In this video, he compares Avatar 1 to Princess Mononoke with the point that Avatar 1's message is terrible and self-loathing, simplistic, yada yada yada, whereas the message in Princess Mononoke is good and morally superior, and if movies want to have a message, so to speak, then they should be more like Princess Mononoke and not like Avatar. And I'm just gonna say it, this is a subjective take at best. And as I will explain later, trying to make a one-to-one comparison between the messages and moral implications of these 2 movies doesn't really work, because they're ultimately 2 completely different stories trying to accomplish 2 completely different things. And I also want to be clear, the point of this video is not to pick a fight with Pilgrim's Past. I have nothing against the guy. I've watched a few of his other videos. I don't think his channel in general is really for me, but, like, for instance, I actually thought this video of his was pretty interesting, you know? Like, it's not that he doesn't make good points or that he doesn't have other good content, you know? And if you happen to agree more with his points than mine about Avatar, that's fine, you know? There's a reasonable discussion we can have about this. But the reason why I'm bringing this back out of my drafts is because I find the points he makes about Avatar to be an interesting case study as to what's going on with a lot of the general discourse surrounding this franchise, where, I mean, not all criticisms of the Blue People movies are bad, but the most popular ones seem to be based more off of caricatures and parodies of this movie than what the movies themselves are actually saying. Now, I did go back and redo a few things from the original draft because I wanted to tone down some of the original snarkiness and sarcasm I had, again, because I'm not here just to be argumentative or to pick a fight, okay? And since I've gone back and made a lot of these edits, there's probably going to be some inconsistent audio quality. I've tried to polish this up as best I can, but given my limitations in time and resources, it is what it is. I can't be a perfectionist here, okay? Look, I just want to get this out here and, have it be food for thought, okay? So, yeah, here we go. Enjoy.
Part 2, Nuance.
So, yeah, the Blue People Avatar franchise has a message, and it is very blunt about that message.
It's no secret that these are pro-environmentalist and anti-colonialist movies, and that tends to rub a lot of people the wrong way. But I can't really get into that without first talking about the nuance. Yes, the nuance.
Again, the argument being repeatedly made here is that
Avatar lacks nuance, and not being nuanced is bad. Therefore, Avatar is bad. And look, okay, the first part is not entirely wrong. Avatar is far from subtle, but if we're gonna talk about nuance, then let me first point out a very deep irony here. This right here, this is not an objective statement of fact. The degree to which any work of art should be nuanced and how quote-unquote good or bad that nuance is, well, that is not and cannot be objectively defined. Why? Well, it depends on what the specific story needs, for one, and second, how audiences will respond to elements like nuance will depend on things like their upbringing, cultural background, the historical, socio-political context of the time an audience exists in, and, personal preference. In other words, it's subjective! Now, is it wrong, per se, to have a subjective opinion? No. In fact, we all have them. But particularly in a discussion about nuance, the least you could do is own up to the bias inherent in your subjective opinions, particularly where it concerns art. Let's zoom out from just Avatar and talk about basically any movie that's had some kind of underlying social political statement. Not all these movies are created equal for various reasons, and among those there is certainly merit to the idea that nuance, or a lack thereof, can affect the quality of a film's statement. But I would also argue that how positively any person will respond to such a film is directly proportional to how much that viewer agrees with the underlying message in the first place. Moreover, an overtly political film may be controversial or poorly received when it's first released, but then decades later it may be celebrated as some kind of high art. Not because it's nuanced per se, but because the prevailing social attitudes of the culture have changed. Now, in the case of Avatar specifically, if you are someone who is not very sympathetic to environmental causes, or just straight up does not like overtly pro-environmentalist or anti-colonialist movies, then, no duh, you're not gonna like Avatar. Or maybe you're fine with movies having social political undertones, environmentalist or otherwise, but you just ask that the story not be simplistic and provide complex shades of gray. Fine. There is nothing inherently wrong with either of these positions. Talking about whether or not you liked a movie and why is fine. But treating that as an objective fact in a discussion about nuance when there are a diversity of viewpoints on this is, it's not very nuanced. Anyway, it's not that I entirely disagree with the assertion that Avatar lacks nuance and could have been improved in that regard. I addressed this somewhat during my character analysis in the last video. I will also take this time to acknowledge that yes, some of the dialogue is rather cringe, we didn't need this Lorax reference, and this
From people sitting on shit you want, you make them your enemy. And then you're justified in taking it.
breaks both the fourth wall and character. Its flaws aside though, I do think Avatar is a bit more nuanced in some areas than a lot of people will give it credit for. Avatar's message is very on the nose, but at least it's organic to the story. There's an effective setup and payoff. I'd much rather have that than a lot of the crap these Disney remakes are trying to pull off. Oh, look! Bella's now a clever inventor that's teaching little girls how to read despite the mean patriarchy trying to put her down. Too bad this doesn't go anywhere and we never revisit this plot point ever again. Hey! Jasmine now has a cool girl boss song! Because, obviously her character really needed that. Yeah, You tell them, girl! Fight that patriarchy! We will not be silenced!
Wait, you're telling me that she was still captured, that whole thing was in her head, and she was effectively silenced and needed rescuing anyway?
Woo-hoo-hoo-hoo! Feminism! Okay, but you see what I mean here, though? No, Avatar is not winning any awards for its narrative depth, but it's also not haphazardly throwing in random pseudo-woke side notes for clout. Is it simple and blunt? Sure, but it's not just cynical pandering, it's sincere and relevant. Whether you agree with the environmentalist or anti-colonialist themes or not, those themes are at least clear and focused. Something that I endlessly have to convey to students whose papers I review as a tutor. Being clear and concise is often a greater strength than adding complexity just for complexity's sake. And in the interest of delving further down this rabbit hole of nuance, I'm gonna spend some time talking about this thing. Alright, so this is a video essay from a YouTuber called Pilgrim's Pass. Now, needless to say, this guy does not like the Blue People movie at all, and to demonstrate why he compares it to Princess Mononoke. Now, this video is, in my opinion, an example of what not to do when talking about nuance.
Just so we're clear, I am not going to respond to the entirety of this video. I don't want to nitpick, and honestly, I have better things to do with my time. Mostly, I'm just going to be responding to the main premises of his argument against Avatar, because they are flawed, to say the least. But you know what, in the interest of fairness and, well,
nuance, this YouTuber does make a few good points regarding the hyper-idealization of nature and the whole noble savage trope. And you know, his segment about how the actions of the Ottoman Empire influenced the discovery of the Americas was pretty informative. It wasn't something I'd thought about before, so props to him on that. I will link his video down in the description, and you can watch it and maybe come to a different conclusion than me. Fine, fair enough, let me know down in the comments if you do. Anyway, he basically compares Avatar to Princess Mononoke so as to say that the message of the silly Blue People movie is bad, self-loathing, and hypocritical, while the message of the movie featuring the warrior princess anime dream girl in wolf's clothing is good, wholesome, and morally superior. Now, it's fine if your opinion happens to align with this take. I'm not saying such a perspective is completely invalid. Personally though, I think that if the goal is to make essentially one-to-one comparisons between the complexities or lack thereof between the thematic elements of these two movies, it doesn't work. Ultimately, these are two different stories being told from two very different viewpoints, derived from two different cultures, each taking inspiration from completely different historical events, and finally are taking place in two different genres that are utilizing different characters and different central conflicts. Put simply,
we're not talking about this or this, we're talking about this!
Granted, he does acknowledge a lot of those differences in the beginning, but then he ignores all that nuance and proceeds to make the comparison anyway, and sure, he says he's not trying to compare the stories of these two movies, rather he's trying to compare the moral implications of their messages, but here's the thing. It's rather inescapable to compare the stories because the stories are intricately intertwined with their messages. Listen, I do love both of these movies, but I don't think it's possible to objectively prove one to be morally superior than the other given the amount of nuance in such a comparison. It's one thing to say I prefer this movie to the other because blah 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 blah, and I also think it's fine to say that one communicates their message more effectively in a purely narrative sense, but two things here. One, even that argument is not entirely objective, and two, if you watch his video, that's not all that he's doing. He extends it to real-world issues, ethics, and morality, which still doesn't entirely work because neither of the messages in either of those movies are going to be applicable in all situations. There's a time and a place for things like Princess Mononoke as well as for things like Avatar. Now, if you're just comparing the characters and the basic plot between these two movies, yeah, Princess Mononoke is quite a bit more nuanced in that regard. But those aren't the only areas in which a movie can have nuance, and like I said in the last video, complex is not inherently better than simple. The degree of complexity in Princess Mononoke's story works really well, but if you were to insert that into Avatar, you would have created this jumbled, garbled, unfocused mess. Not unless you completely rewrote the story, to which some people would say, yeah, that's the entire point, Avatar's story is crap. Okay, but here's the problem. This isn't judging Avatar based on its own merits.
No, it's judging it by insisting it be something that it's not. In other words, you're looking at movies that you prefer and saying, I really like these elements, and Avatar doesn't have these things, therefore Avatar is bad. Now, let me repeat, if this is you, that's fine, that's not altogether invalid. But, what does this say about Avatar in and of itself versus your own pre-existing expectations? Not saying it can't be both, but in a discussion about nuance, it's important to be able to tell the difference between the two. So okay, this guy happens to prefer Princess Mononoke because its themes, conflicts, and central characters are more nuanced than Avatar's. Fine, cool, nothing wrong with that. Beyond that though, a lot of his analysis isn't so much nuanced as it is biased. Okay, I'm sorry, I'll stop. And that's what's laughably ironic about his whole video. He spends a great amount of time extolling the virtues of Princess Mononoke's story, giving an interesting and in-depth analysis of its characters, themes, and conflicts. But given that this is a compare and contrast video, at what point does he talk in depth about Avatar, for better or for worse? Yeah, that's the thing. He doesn't. He only engages with the story of Avatar at an incredibly superficial level. And what I mean by that is he's not really engaging with the story or message of Avatar in good faith. That is, he's just regurgitating a lot of the same anti-Avatar talking points that we've heard over and over and over again. Specifically that of the simple black and white morality between the heroes and villains, which, like, okay, if you don't like that sort of story dynamic, that's fine, but that's also your own subjective take. A story and a message being simple does not necessarily mean there can't be value or deeper meaning gleaned from that. And herein lies the problem with analyses like this. It's not that Avatar is above criticism, it's definitely not. It's that these people are bringing their own subjective takes, and in Pilgrim's past case specifically here, he's projecting his own personal issues with things like woke Hollywood or broader cringe environmentalism onto the story and message of Avatar, even though the movie itself isn't necessarily saying what he thinks he's saying. Or at the very least, that's not necessarily the only way to interpret this story. So with that in mind, let's take a look at this.
You. All of this is because of you. Thank God we're here as the enlightened path to show you that it's you.
These days, there are angry ghosts all around us, dead from wars, sickness, starvation, and nobody cares.
Look, everyone! This is what hatred looks like. This is what it does when it catches hold of you.
Yeah, do you notice something here? Do you notice the issue with the way he's framing the messages of Avatar versus Princess Mononoke? He's not letting Avatar speak for itself. Rather, he's regurgitating a caricature of Avatar made by someone else, specifically the nostalgia critic, which, was a choice. I'll just leave it at that. But you would think that if Avatar is so bad to him, he'd provide direct quotes to illustrate why. But no, the closest he gets is this.
They want some of that cheddar, and to kill those savages. And that's literally how they talk. I'm referencing real movie dialogue, and it's horrendous.
Which are both misquoted completely out of context. But this is the premise from which he is building. Princess Mononoke's message is good and morally superior because it promotes healing and peace between peoples, learning to understand both sides and the complexities surrounding why people do the things that they do. And I mean, yeah, that is a good message. However, therein lies the irony, in promoting a movie whose message is, at least in part, understanding both sides equally, he completely strawmans what Avatar's message is. Avatar's message is not,
You. All of this is because of you.
like, I'm sorry, this is just such a reductive, shallow take. It really is. But lest it seem like I'm not really engaging with the rest of his analysis, let me respond to some of these other points.
Captain Planet had more subtlety.
Alright, honest question. Why does a movie and or its message have to be subtle in order to be good? Think about it. Why? You know, the messages of stories like A Christmas Carol or The Chronicles of Narnia are not ones I'd necessarily consider very subtle, and yet they are timeless classics. So, yeah, you tell me, why is subtle better than not? I'll wait. This statement here isn't just a lazy hyperbole, it's committing the same mistake as people who think that complex is inherently better than simple. It's not.
I mean, yeah, Captain Planet wasn't subtle, but that didn't make it a bad show. The fact that it was meant for kids is irrelevant. Either way, you still have to utilize writing effectively, and doing that for kids takes a lot more skill and discipline than a lot of people realize, but you know what, we don't have time to get into that right now. More to the point though, Contagion is another example of a movie that I would argue is not at all subtle in its themes of handling public health versus mass hysteria and people profiting off of disinformation campaigns. Seriously, this thing pulls no punches. I love it. I would argue that this grittiness and bluntness is its biggest strength. But imagine if this had come out during or after the COVID-19 pandemic. Can you imagine the sort of controversy it would stir amongst certain groups of people? But is that reflective of the movie itself? Or is that more reflective of the subjective, emotional, social, political baggage that someone might be bringing to the table when they go see the movie? And that brings me to my next point.
The only good humans, aside from dead ones, are the ones willing to betray humanity for the interests of the Nazi. No one else.
Yeah. So, this aside from dead ones thing is basically the premise from which he's arguing that Avatar's message is incredibly vile because, again, there's no nuance, it's just black and white. They're not promoting peace between peoples and something Jake started a race war or whatever, and it's just like, you know, here's the thing. This interpretation really only works if you look at Avatar at an incredibly face value, hyper-literalistic way, which is like, dude, come on. I know that Avatar is relatively simple, but do I really need to explain why this is not how allegory works? Seriously, do the people who make this argument also go around saying the only good stormtrooper, aside from dead ones, are the ones willing to betray the Empire for the interest of the rebellion, no one else? I mean, sure, there's probably someone somewhere out there on Reddit arguing about how, well, blowing up the Death Star is cool and all, but there weren't just stormtroopers there were like medics and janitors just trying to do their jobs and support their families, not that Luke Skywalker seemed to care, so Luke is actually the villain, and if that's you, then all I can say is, you must be really fun at parties. Yes, things in the real world are not so simple, humans in history are complicated, but here's something to remember. Star Wars and Avatar are not real. I know that seems like a bit of a cop-out, I know, saying it's fiction can only be used so many times, but it is important to keep that suspension of disbelief in mind here. And this is also something that occurred to me as I was thinking about how to rewrite this portion of the video. Again, we can all agree that the villains in Avatar are simple, fine. But here's why that doesn't bother me nearly as much as viewers like Pilgrim. I do not interpret the RDA as a literal one-to-one stand-in for all of humanity. I don't interpret it to mean that the solution to colonialism is to unilaterally hate all Europeans, nor do I think it's telling people to literally worship the earth any more than Harry Potter is telling kids to do witchcraft and worship Satan. And I am certainly not coming out of the movie theater all like,
You guys want to make things go boom boom for the environment?
no, just no. Like, again, guys, the blue people are not real. They can't hurt you. What the villains in Avatar represent is humanity at its worst. It's a cautionary tale against letting things like greed get the better of us, thus repeating the same atrocities of the past. And I don't know, I guess I fail to see why that has to be such a controversial take. But in this context, at least, it is made controversial because critics like Pilgrim choose to approach Avatar with the mindset of, Avatar is simple, ergo Avatar must be interpreted simplistically. Which is just such an incurious, if not lazy approach to film analysis. Like, even if we are going to take this hyper-literalistic approach, is humanity adequately represented by what is narratively a corrupt dystopian corporation? And is betraying that corporation and calling it out for what it is a betrayal of humanity as a whole? You know, the reason why we're not given any sort of context about why the humans need unobtainium so badly or how it might be helping their economy or whatever is because that's ultimately not what matters to characters like Selfridge or Porridge. What matters to them is that they're making money off of it. I mean, unobtainium could be a life-saving drug or just a pointless essential oil of the future for all they care, as long as they can make a profit. Yes, it is shallow and cringe. And that was the point. Greed is, by definition, short-sighted, shallow, and destructive, and this is precisely what Avatar is trying to criticize. Again, I don't know why that has to be so controversial. Let's dig a little bit deeper though and consider that Avatar is, among other things, a classic alien invasion story told in reverse. We are the aliens. And I'm going to touch a little bit more on this theme later, but consider classics like War of the Worlds or even more modern things like Independence Day. Most people don't sit there and complain about how the aliens are super shallow and one-dimensional. Oh, all they want to do is destroy the Earth. I mean, some people probably do, especially because this trope has been used so many times now, but ultimately, the reason why these stories work so well is because the aliens make such a compelling existential threat. Yeah, maybe they need something desperately on Earth that's going to save their own planet, maybe there are complex social economic reasons behind what they're doing, but that kind of doesn't matter to the story at hand because ultimately, we still live here. Maybe don't blow up all of New York to get what you want. And this is the narrative context of the final showdown between the humans and the Na'vi. The Na'vi are not trying to exterminate the evil humans because they think the only good human is a dead one. They are retaliating and defending themselves against an existential threat. Now, you could say the humans are also motivated by self-defense, but consider that they're going a step far beyond that. They are attempting to blow up an incredibly sacred site in order to send the Na'vi a message that, hey, actually, yeah, we can take whatever we want, and how dare you try to fight back? Let us show you just how powerful we are. Again, even if we're going to continue down this literalist route, imagine a race of aliens came and destroyed a bunch of major city centers, and then when we humans rally a defense, they decide to respond by blowing up sites of major cultural, religious significance. Oh, but then there's pilgrims pass up on the mothership complaining about that one guy who betrayed all the other aliens. Oh no, how dare he not see above the cycle of hatred and just perpetuate more violence? Oh, why can't we just understand both sides? Do you see now how incredibly stupid this take is? Again, I am not saying you have to like Avatar. You may prefer stories with more nuance between the heroes and villains. Fine. But this, aside from Dead One's take, this is just utterly bad faith media criticism. And unfortunately, it doesn't stop here.
The Na'vi don't even invade other tribes of Na'vi as far as I can tell. They live in perfect, utopic happiness. Even in knowledge about nature and reality, do the Na'vi prove themselves superior to humans. In fact, it is human science, not Na'vi shamanism, which proves limited in the story. And the Na'vi are actually capable of reproducing human technological feats with their knowledge. They can fly in the air, travel long distances. Even the bloody internet and transferring a consciousness from one body to another are all things they are capable of replicating, but without fancy human tech.
Okay, first of all, does he think that you need fancy tech in order to travel long distances? Because you don't? Humans have been doing this as far back as the Neolithic period. Heck, many species of animals can do this, for crying out loud. So I'm really not sure why he thinks it's so unrealistic that the Na'vi wouldn't have means to do the same, but fine, you know what, more to the point. Science fiction has a long, rich history of criticizing modern industrial society, particularly by contrasting it with so-called primitive cultures. Showing the limits of science as we understand it is kind of part and parcel with the whole genre, dude. Avatar is by no means unique, let alone uniquely bad in doing this. Like, okay, he doesn't like how angelic the Na'vi are portrayed in these stories. Okay, fair enough. But these specific elements of the Na'vi traveling long distances, having a biological internet, avoiding conflict with one another, all these things are ultimately just world-building elements. What's wrong with them? Like, what is his criticism here? That the Na'vi behave logically within the confines of the world-building system that's set up? I mean, personally, I find the concept of a giant biological computer to which its sentient beings can connect to and upload memories or upload consciousness and stuff is a fascinating premise from which to build, particularly in contrast to how a lot of human societies have developed. He tries to cast this in a light where the Na'vi are not just unrealistic but also evolutionarily unfeasible. But here's the thing with both world building and evolution. When you create a universe where the people therein can connect with nature in ways that we never could in real life, then yeah, why wouldn't those people behave in ways completely different than normal humans? So, to those who want the Na'vi to be more complex, my question is, how? How specifically would you want them to be flawed?
because fundamentally, they're not human. Their biological and societal development is completely different from ours. You need to consider what kind of flaws would organically make sense in this sort of context. Otherwise, you run the risk of adding complexity just for complexity's sake, which, and I cannot stress this enough, does not improve the story, or its thematic message for that matter.
They are what a 6-year-old thinks of Native Americans after watching Disney's Pocahontas for the millionth time. And I would know, because that's what I did as a kid. I like that movie, by the way.
Wait, I'm sorry, what?
I like that movie, by the way.
Oh, you do you?
It promotes peace between peoples, unlike Avatar. Which is why I hate it when Avatar is compared to Pocahontas. It doesn't deserve such a comparison.
Okay, so let me get this straight. He doesn't like Avatar in part because of how it hyper-idealizes Native Americans. You know, similar to what they did in Pocahontas. But he likes Pocahontas, you see, because it promotes peace and also something about showing the pros and cons of both sides. Okay. Look, there is nothing wrong with liking Pocahontas despite how it idealizes Native Americans, just like there's nothing wrong with liking Avatar despite a similar problem. But my point here is that you cannot sit there and rag on Avatar for this sort of thing while basically giving Pocahontas a free pass. Oh, but Pocahontas has the better message. Does it? Does it though? Because when you consider what actually happened to the Native Americans, including the Powhatan tribe, and also that Pocahontas was a real person that Disney decided to age up and sexualize because reasons, it's not at all unreasonable to say that, hey, maybe this was not the time or place for such a message. Maybe you're whitewashing history and that's not okay. I mean, for all of Avatar's faults, it at least does not shy away from how brutally indigenous peoples have been treated. Now, one could easily say that they don't like Disney's Pocahontas because they see it as an accurate portrayal of history. They like it because it's a fun, wholesome piece of animation. Okay, fair enough. Now, what makes you think I can't engage with Avatar in a similar way? You see what I mean here? The sword cuts both ways. Do not pretend otherwise.
People talk like animals are wiser than us, as they live in such balance with nature, like that time some hippie lady trained a gorilla to do sign language and tell us humans were stupid because of capitalism, and how animals were so much wiser for not driving SUVs or some shit.
I am Coco.
Okay, I'm really not sure what Coco the gorilla has to do with Avatar aside from them both just happening to exist within the broad spectrum of environmentalist messaging, as though liking Avatar and its message must also mean that I think Coco the gorilla could actually communicate with sign language and by extension also understood the broader implications of climate change and that this video wasn't at all staged or whatever, which, to be clear, I don't think that. But, okay, to be fair, he does kind of have a point here. There are many people who over-romanticize nature, and one of the manifestations of that is the idea that animals are wiser than we are for not destroying the earth or whatever. However, I fail to see where Avatar asserts the higher wisdom of animals in any meaningful way. Yes, it presents an idyllic lifestyle in symbiosis with nature, but it's not really using the supposed wisdom of Pandoran wildlife in order to do so. Instead, it's presented to us through the lens of the Na'vi and their deity Awa. The function of Pandora's fauna is to induce a sense of awe and empathy. You don't have to assume a higher wisdom in them in order to engage with that, any more than I have to pretend that the frogs I take care of are secretly smart in order to care about them. Frankly, if either movie is blatantly projecting a human sense of higher morality onto animals here, it's Princess Mononoke, the flaws of such characters notwithstanding. But again, you don't have to assume a real-world spiritual wisdom in animals in order to engage with either of these texts. We know this isn't how things are in real life. That's why we call these stories fiction.
Every animal on this planet would do the same thing in our position, and worse, because they wouldn't have the self-awareness to consciously try to hold back and stop themselves from consuming everything, and they certainly wouldn't adopt environmentalist policies. The bunnies rampaging across Australia didn't go all like, "How dare you, fellow bunnies? How dare you? We are harming the delicate balance of this ecosystem. That's why I'm not going to bunny school no more."
I mean, being in our exact same position kind of implies that they would have the same level of self-awareness that we do. But okay, fine. Let's assume that they didn't, or that at least they chose not to pursue a society that values the environment. Fine. Has it occurred to you that that's kind of the point of a lot of alien invasion stories? The aliens are behaving like locusts, and it's a cautionary tale for humans to not do that.
Here's what's odd to me about this whole thing, though. In this same train of thought, he makes the point that in order to really protect the environment, we must overcome our own human nature. That is, we need to overcome the impulse to just endlessly consume and destroy and survive, which, look, I don't disagree with that. That's a good point. What gets me, though, is that he makes that point while also ragging on Jake's character arc because he abandoned his old, disgusting human body and became a mighty Na'vi. Y'all see the self-contradiction here, right? Like, okay, you could read that very cynically, to mean that, oh, humans are disgusting, we must literally live just like the Na'vi. Or, hear me out, you could interpret it as saying exactly what Pilgrim's Past was saying here, that in order to really protect the environment and to save ourselves, we must overcome our baser human impulses. See, this is what I mean when I'm saying that he's not engaging with Avatar's story or message in a good faith way. He's approaching it with this very cynical, reductive tunnel vision, not considering alternate perspectives or the fact that maybe he's completely misinterpreting the text. And this kind of translates over even somewhat to how he interprets Princess Mononoke. He consistently presents this dichotomy between nature and human civilization, which if you know anything about Miyazaki's philosophy, you would know that that's not really a dichotomy he holds to in his films. A lot of the points he makes across multiple films, including Princess Mononoke, is that to hurt nature is really to hurt ourselves. And you know what? Actually, this brings me to another point. He continually reads the whole thing about Ashitaka being infected with a plague of some sort very simplistically. He pretends that this infection is more a manifestation of demonic hatred or anger or whatever, which is part of the picture, like hatred does fuel that fire. But it wasn't simply nature's fault that it got infected so. That demonic boar spirit didn't come out of nowhere. It was infected as a direct result of the actions of Lady Eboshi. Likewise, that whole thing with rabbits being out of control in Australia is the direct result of human actions. To ignore this aspect of Princess Mononoke's message is to oversimplify the greater, shall I say, nuances of this story. This is just another meta-criticism that's relying on a flimsy reading of the text while also projecting his and/or other people's pre-existing assumptions onto it. Again, I'm not saying that none of Pilgrim's points are valid. Rather, it's that many of his points are not as well supported as he thinks they are. And all of this, by the way, is just a microcosm of how he feels about Japanese media versus so-called boomer Hollywood elites. And I've watched some anime in my time, it's great, but anime is rife with its own examples of hypocrisy and problematic tropes. And Hollywood's not a monolith either. Look, I'm not a James Cameron stan, I like some of his movies, but when you say this about him...
It's like, okay, Jimmy. May I call you Jimmy? If the Navi's way of life is so superior, why don't you go live in the jungle?
Wow, that's I've never found the whole if you love it so much, why don't you marry it kind of argument very convincing, but you got me here, I'm stumped.
But it's sheer hypocrisy to have a movie trash-talking the industrial society while producing massive numbers of useless plastic toys and merch on a massive industrial scale and cutting down countless trees to make these crappy posters.
Oh, wow. So much nuance. This movie's completely undone because apparently there are plastic toys that exist and oh no! He made a poster! The font's still in papyrus! Somebody help me! It's everywhere! Huh. I was wondering where that guy went. Okay, we'll get back to all that, but regarding my point earlier about Avatar being a little more nuanced than people will give it credit for, oh boy. Okay, let's look at one of the areas where he's talking about the hyper-idealization of nature, which, like I said, is a valid critique. But then he said this.
This reminds us that civilization is more merciful than nature. We forget this when we see the vast number of homeless people living badly, but at least they are living. They'd be in much worse conditions out in the wilderness.
Okay, you know what? I'm just gonna say it. Pilgrim, can I call you Pilgrim? If civilization is so merciful, why don't you go be homeless? Okay, wait, hold on. I do need to put this caveat here. I don't know this guy. I don't know if he himself has ever been homeless, and I don't know if maybe he'd still prefer that over to just being out in the wilderness. And if that's the case, fair enough. I am not here to dictate what he himself would prefer to go through in his own life. What I am going to criticize, though, is how he is framing the dichotomy he's painting between living out in nature versus in civilization. Because if you watch the video, he's not doing this using real-world data or highlighting the experiences of various homeless people throughout the world. No, he's using the frame of reference of a fictional character named Ashitaka and his interactions with fictional people in a fictional place called Irontown. And I don't know who needs to hear this, but this is a really terrible argument.
Now, look, he's not entirely wrong here. Obviously, nature can be very cruel. Guess what, though? So is human civilization. People living in severe poverty, especially where homelessness is concerned, is a symptom of that. Oh, yeah, speaking of that, pay no attention to the violence, massacres, and the starvation, disease, the greed, almost getting mugged, the brothels the girls of Irontown escaped from. You know, all the things that the movie made a point of showing you or telling you about. Civilization, we live in a society. This is fine. Everything's fine. It's fine. Oddly enough, he does point to some of these vices, but he doesn't seem to connect the dots. Instead, he says human civilization is more merciful than nature, which is not always true. I mean, if you don't know what you're doing, then yeah, you're probably not going to have a very good time in the wilderness. It is not a forgiving place to be if you get hurt or make careless mistakes. Ultimately, though, nature's cruelty is that of indifference. Humanity, on the other hand, reaches levels of depravity that the wilderness does not. I know what I'm getting if I'm facing down a hungry bear. A gang of thugs? Not so much. Whichever situation is worse really just depends on things like where you live and what resources you have available. To be clear, I'm not denying the blessings of living in a modern, technologically advanced society. And many places do have public and private programs aimed at helping people like the homeless. But what if they live in an area where those sorts of services aren't available? In that case, the benefits of them living within the confines of civilization are often just that of proximity. Sure, they may be closer to emergency healthcare, shelters, soup kitchens, or housing programs, but what good is that proximity if ultimately these benefits are rendered largely inaccessible due to things like lack of funding, understaffing, short-sighted policymaking, or wait lists? Which is to say nothing of how social stigmatization or how certain law enforcement zoning practices can inadvertently make the problem worse. Whatever the circumstances are that led to someone becoming homeless, if they are left to fend for themselves in the streets with few resources to turn to, then is it really that different than just leaving them out in the wilderness? However, if you're talking about something like homelessness in the context of Princess Mononoke versus Avatar, then it's not simply a comparison of dropping one individual into either a developed society versus just out in nature. No, it's a comparison of two fictional societies living within two fictional universes. And like real societies, the values, philosophies, and norms will influence things like how they care for those in need, not simply whether or not that society is technologically advanced or not. For instance, the women and the poor don't have it better in Irontown by sheer virtue of its industrialization. They have it better because the values of its leader have made it so. Swap her out for a cruel despot, though. Then you'd be talking about an oppressed people forced to work in horrible conditions. Yes, in many ways the Na'vi are an idealized, romanticized caricature of indigenous cultures, and I agree that simplification presents its own problems. But simplified or not, the story of Avatar is not about villainizing technology in and of itself. No, it's a story about the consequences of greed and excess, particularly when it comes at the expense of innocent human, or, well, alien lives. So okay, canonize Ashitaka as a saint because he can see above the cycle of hatred, but when this guy says,
Jake never tried to see with eyes unclouded by hate, so Jake was just part of the problem, part of this terrible cycle of violence.
it's a total non sequitur because this
Look, everyone! This is what hatred looks like. This is what it does when it catches hold of you.
is not what the story of Avatar is about. Like, dude.
We're not talking about this or this. We're talking about this.
I'm not saying that's a bad message. I'm saying that that's not what Avatar's goal was, and that's not a bad thing either. Ultimately, the driving conflict between the Na'vi and the interests of the RDA Corporation could not be reconciled so long as those in charge of the RDA valued its bottom line over the rights of the indigenous people already living there. It also must needs be remarked that diplomacy was attempted here. I know a lot of this is subtext, but contrary to what this Hishi video said, Jake's mission was not to tell the Na'vi what the humans needed. The RDA had been there for years, they knew English and more or less understood what avatars were. You seriously think they had no idea about the humans needing unobtainium? No, by the point that Jake arrived, the RDA's relationship with the natives had deteriorated because, well, you know. Jake was used as a means to gain intelligence so as to best exploit the Na'vi's weaknesses. His arc isn't simply that of becoming a mighty Na'vi. No, it's him seeing the corruption of the RDA for what it was and being like, screw that, I'm not going to be used to hurt these people anymore. Which goes back to the different sources of inspiration between these two stories. One was inspired by the horrible treatment of Native Americans, driven in part by the greed of those displacing them, see examples like the Trail of Tears, and the other by the struggles of a traditionally agrarian society learning how to balance its new industrial advancements with the need to still protect nature. Yeah, no duh, these are going to be two different stories with completely different messages. Anyway, this is the context in which Jake Sully's character lives. Yes, his society has incredibly advanced technology that could present wonderful opportunities, if they were available to him. Instead, he's left disabled because despite there being tech that could fix his spine, he doesn't have the money to pay for it.
Strong prey on the weak. It's just the way things are. Nobody does a damn thing.
So when Pilgrim's Past quotes this thing,
from the period of the 1930s up through the 60s, the picture that was drawn of the Mayas that they never had war, they never disagreed with each other.
People clung to that idea tenaciously, and I think part of the reason for that is they were reacting to all of the excesses and the maladies of Western culture. You have to remember that their context was that of 2 world wars.
Granted, this is an interesting deconstruction of the noble savage trope, and that's perfectly valid. But I would also like to push back on the implication he's making here, that the appeal of things like Avatar reflects a sort of juvenile mindset. It can, but that need not always be the case. Even in cases where it is, there may still be something in that perspective worth exploring if you really want to understand people and, see past the hate. So let's consider what something like Avatar or a statement about
all of the excesses and the maladies of Western culture
would have meant to someone back in 2009. Think about the issues that were going on at the time. I'm old enough to vividly remember the 2008 financial crisis. Not only that, but I lived in Michigan, which was especially hard hit by that recession. I remember riding in the car and seeing numerous for sale signs pop up in front of homes like weeds. I remember people I knew losing their homes to foreclosure. I remember my dad losing his job and struggling to find work for almost 2 years. I remember it being so hard to find work that I had to spend my summer before college in Ohio just to get a minimum wage job. It sucked. So when Jake said,
They can fix his spine if you got the money, but not on vet benefits, not in this economy.
Nowadays that seems like some simple throwaway line, but trust me, back then it resonated much differently. No, it does not excuse the problems within the noble savage or white savior tropes, but it does provide some useful context here, doesn't it? One of the stated goals of Avatar was to examine the excesses of our greedy, consumer-driven society and ask ourselves, is there a better way? And by that I don't mean, let's literally go live in the jungle! No, that's not what Jimmy meant!
Rather, it's maybe there's more to life than the relentless pursuit of wealth, and oh, maybe we shouldn't cut down all the trees for profit because, greed and destroying the environment are not sustainable in the long term and actually hurts people? Listen, Pilgrim, buddy, you're not wrong when you say that raging against capitalism ironically sells really well in a capitalist system, but in this context, you're kind of missing the forest for the trees here. To be honest with ourselves about society's faults is not inherently self-hatred or self-loathing. It's self-reflection. And it's something that art and media have always done, particularly in the realms of science fiction. That's why Avatar paints us as the destructive alien invaders in the story. It's not telling us that technology is bad in and of itself.
But I don't think technological civilization is the problem, and I do not want to live in the jungle, much less use cutting-edge tech to make an anti-technology movie with state-of-the-art special effects. This is why the environmental message in The Lord of the Rings is not a cringe fest like an Avatar, and neither is the message of Princess Mononoke. The emphasis is on adopting a better perspective that cares for nature, not condemning technology and civilization as a whole, and telling us all to wipe our asses with banana leaves.
Oh my goodness. Okay, to be fair, he came out with this video like 3 years ago now or so maybe he's since moved on in this line of reasoning, but for anyone in my audience who may be thinking a similar thing, Avatar is itself a celebration and advances in CGI and performance capture technology. How in the world can you watch it and walk away thinking this is an anti-tech film? Yes, Lord of the Rings and Princess Mononoke are about adopting a higher perspective that's about caring for nature rather than singling out all of human civilization. Avatar is doing the same thing, just in a different way. If you're going to walk away with a hyper-literalistic interpretation about abandoning civilization and wiping yourself with banana leaves, I think that might be a you problem, because that's not what Avatar is saying. No, it's prompting us to ask where in our relentless pursuit for wealth and progress did we forget some basic fundamental truth that is bigger than ourselves? When did we allow ourselves to become so detached and so inhuman? The trope of the invading aliens, indifferent to human life and squashing us underfoot, is actually a reflection of ourselves. In fact, the War of the Worlds touched on this very theme. Among other things, H.G. Wells used the Martians as a means to explore how we humans have treated animals and even each other with a cruel indifference. He recounts the extermination of indigenous Tasmanians at the hand of Europeans, and then asks, "Are we such apostles of mercy as to complain if the Martians warred in the same spirit?" Now, like it or hate it, Avatar is but another manifestation of Western science fiction exploring this kind of question. Which is one of the reasons why the comparison to Princess Mononoke's themes doesn't really apply.
We're not talking about this or this. We're talking about this.
For what it's worth, James Cameron does plan on developing both sides a little bit more in future movies. Like, the third movie apparently is going to flip the whole Na'vi good humans bad dynamic. But for the purposes of the first movie, whatever faults the Na'vi had or whatever praises could be said of the human side, it had very little to do with the main plot. The human villains in Avatar are portrayed in a one-sided manner because the whole concept of colonialism itself is a one-sided power dynamic. But it doesn't just touch on the horrible treatment of indigenous peoples. Jake Sully's character brings a lot to the table in that, like the Na'vi who get killed, he is also a casualty of human excess. He was willing to give his life for freedom, for his country. And for that, he was effectively left abandoned in a wheelchair with a meager VA check that could barely cover the cost of living. His spine could have been fixed. The VA just wouldn't or couldn't pay for it. That reflects a real-world problem in the US where disabled veterans are not well cared for and, oh look, they're more likely to end up homeless than the general population! Discussions around this issue were especially poignant in 2009 when the Iraq War was in full swing on top of the economic crisis. So, yeah, I find it little wonder that Jake would betray humanity if that was the bleak life he had to look forward to. So excuse me if I gag at yet another rant that reduces his motivations to just wanting to boink some blue chick. That critique is just plain ridiculous, asinine, and it needs to die. So when Pilgrim's Past rants about Avatar being an anti-tech film, which it's not, in part because it's so funny that Jimmy would make this while using advanced technology, I'm like, oh,
You mean the breakthrough in motion capture technology that gave people jobs at a time when jobs were sorely needed? Not to mention that this tech has the potential to reduce a movie production's carbon footprint, considering that you don't have to travel as often or to as many places in order to film a scene. You can just render the environment in post.
While producing massive numbers of useless plastic toys and merch on a massive industrial scale.
Dude, how many of these plastic toys do you think are actually in circulation? I'm sorry, did I miss the part where there was suddenly a huge demand for plastic Avatar merchandise? Because I'm an Avatar fan and I don't even own any of this stuff. Don't get me wrong, I could do without all this plastic merchandise, but there's also a thing called supply and demand. With the exception of Disney's Pandora Land Adventure thingy-mabob place, like, has anyone seen store shelves stocked with this stuff? Relative to a lot of other franchises, I really don't think Avatar is doing that big of damage.
And cutting down countless trees to make these crappy posters.
Ah yes, the paper products. The classic trope of how many trees had to die in order to make these things that I don't like. Well, that depends. What kind of paper is it? What kind of trees did they use to make the paper? Where did they get the lumber from? Is the lumberyard sustainable? What sort of processing does the paper mill use? Is it using any recycled paper? Are the posters themselves recyclable? How many theaters are using physical posters and how many are just displaying the pictures electronically? And sure, there is a bit of an irony to having a pro-environmentalist movie while also making plastic merchandise, but you do realize what the main driving forces behind things like plastic pollution and deforestation are, right? It's not non-existent metric tons of Jake Sully action figures discarded in landfills, and it's not a bunch of people making stupid movie posters. No. Plastic pollution is driven by disposable single-use plastics, and in the case of the ocean at least, by discarded industrial fishing equipment. Yes, we could do with less plastic, but I'm not nearly so concerned about the toys themselves as I am the packaging they come in. Deforestation in the tropics, which is where most deforestation occurs, is largely driven by unsustainable agricultural practices. Reducing our paper consumption is good, but it doesn't necessarily reduce the amount of deforestation in these areas. And it also fails to consider the fact that there are many sustainable lumber yards from which we get paper. So my concern isn't so much that they cut down trees to make paper, it's where did the paper come from? A thing that can be very difficult to measure if you're the one negotiating things like licensing contracts with manufacturers, because such companies are not always going to be very transparent about where their sources come from. Laying it all at the feet of Hollywood elites, whatever real problems they may have, is both ignorant and disingenuous. Particularly when it seems you're only doing it because it gives you another reason to rag on a movie you don't like. Otherwise, you'd be applying the same critical eye to, Japanese anime, right? Seriously, can anyone think of anything more merchandisable than anime? Trust me, as someone who spent multiple years of her career doing conservation education, I could go on and on about this sort of thing, but for the sake of time, I won't. I will just close this by saying, points about, Avatar's invalid because look, James Cameron is so rich, what's his carbon footprint? And look, they have plastic toys, and how many trees did they have to cut down to make these stupid movie posters? It just comes across as performative outrage, okay? This is not a nuanced good faith take. It's just pointless nitpicking that doesn't solve anything. And with that out of the way, there's my video, all done, out in the open. Enjoy, I guess. I do want to reiterate, even though I got a little bit more argumentative towards the end there, I have nothing personal against Pilgrim's Past, okay? We can just agree to disagree on Avatar versus Princess Mononoke, it's fine. I mean, I only have 18 subscribers as of posting this, but you never know how this is going to perform in the algorithm and who might be watching this, so if there's someone who has a weird impulse to go troll his channel, please don't. Like, what is wrong with you? Now, I do plan on making another video way in the future at some point strictly about Avatar's visuals and why the visual spectacle works so well. I am not really going to touch too much more on depiction of indigenous cultures in these movies, because that's not my area of expertise and it's not really my place to talk about this anyway. Suffice it to say, I do think that despite being a fan of this franchise, it does behoove people to at least be aware of the more problematic aspects here, and some of the limitations with depictions of indigenous cultures. So, yeah, I don't really have anything else to close with here, so bye!